Hey, welcome to the Cam Otis Show. We're a father-son business podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. Today, we get a good friend of mine and business partner, Air Force veteran, and a couple of other tags that go in there, father, husband, those other things too, other things about our lives. Hanging out with us, Michael Klepacz. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good, Otis. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, I'm excited to have you in here because you and I have talked about this, of course, but I still think it's a fascinating thing that I want our listeners to kind of hear how this happened. Because, folks, if you haven't looked up Michael yet and seen what he did in the Air Force, he was that guy that was covered in grease. And when you think about Air Force airplanes, it's much different than Army trucks, right? Oil and grease and things, but that was him. But now he's into organics and natural materials, and that's like, that ain't even two sides of the same coin. That's like a coin over here and a piece of 2x4 over there, kind of stuff. How the heck did that happen?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's miles away. So, what the shortest answer possible is, when I was going to high school, I was learning to be an aircraft mechanic. 9/11 happened, the aviation industry took a dive, and so the best option for me was to join the Air Force so I could get a chance to work on heavies so that I didn't have to work my way up just working on puddle jumpers. And so, had a really cool job for what it was. I worked in isochronal maintenance. Basically, every couple of years, the planes would come to us, and we would tear them down over 4 to 6 weeks, put them back together. So I wasn't like a flight line, mechanic. I call them tire kickers. We were inspectors and heavy maintenance. And I ended up getting hurt on the job, and it really made me kind of reevaluate myself and the career, right? And my nickname was Pigpen, by the way. It said right on the side of my hard hat, K7 on one side, Pigpen across the front, because I was really constantly covered in grease. I would have to go home and wash myself in Gojo like every day from work, because the inside of the tail is just disgusting. I loved it, but I really just reevaluated my life. I'm like, I could have loved this career, but being around a bunch of radiation and a bunch of grease and constantly covered in jet fuel and hydraulic fluid and this and that, I just kind of made a giant leap in the opposite direction.
How did you pick that opposite direction? Was it a choice to be opposite? Was a like, I need to get rid of these 5 things, so I'm going to go in the opposite direction of those 5 things? What was
The truth, the truth is kind of embarrassing, maybe. So I had been teaching English for the few months prior in Poland, making $20 an hour, just kind of enjoying this gap year while they were redoing the GI Bill, because the new GI Bill, the post 9/11 GI Bill, came out finally in 2009. So I did like a 2-year gap year just waiting for it, because I got out in 2007. And when I was in Poland, I felt great, eating good food and stuff like that. And when I got back to the States, I started gaining back weight like crazy, and I kind of dove into the whole food system. And at the time, not embarrassed to say, I was using medical cannabis for medication instead of the let's see, what was it? Steroid, muscle relaxer, and painkiller that the VA gave me. So I just wanted to use one thing that didn't destroy my liver. And so it was July, and this is the part that's kind of embarrassing. So it was July, which is mulberry season in Ohio, and I was at my uncle's house. And I said to him, "Hey, you gonna pick any mulberries this year?" And he's like, "No, you can have at it." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So I went into his garage and I grabbed a wrench and a rope, like a dog bone wrench and a rope, tied the dog bone wrench to the rope, and grabbed a tarp, put the tarp under one of the mulberry trees, slung the wrench up in the tree, and started tugging on it. And I'm just getting rained on by mulberries, and I'm just kind of looking around, and it just hit me. And I was like, this is it. I want to get into sustainable agriculture. Like, I was instantly sold on the idea of all of a sudden becoming like an organic farmer.
In Europe, where it's all about fresh, right? And I mean, how
Right.
that experience, just when you move to Poland, how is that shift? Because now you don't stock the refrigerator, you don't go to the Costco and buy, 10 pounds of tomatoes. How is that experience shifting too?
Well, okay, so it was hard to remember until my mom came to visit for the first time a couple of months ago, and I took her to the grocery store. Or even first and foremost, she's in my house, and I just have a carton of eggs sitting on top of the microwave, and she's like, "Why don't you have them?" I mean, they're on top of the microwave, covered in chicken shit. You know what I mean? They're not washed at all. They're just room temperature chicken shit eggs, the way God intended. And and so I take her to the grocery store, and the carrots are dirty, the potatoes are dirty, like nothing's washed. Everything is, let's be honest, everything is protected by nature's immune system that, marketers and USDA and stuff has decided to rinse off, and then you watch the shelf life tank. So I don't think I need to tell you guys, maybe I need to tell your audience, once you wash off that bloom of the egg, it's done.
In your experience, like, what is the actual, like, cultural difference that you noticed when you went to Poland?
Poland is essentially, and I say this very often, it's the population of California smashed into the size of Ohio, but with a lot more spread out as far as the population goes. And so there's this massive acceptance of dirty food, and in America, and I don't want to go after the bad guy, but it's marketing. It's the marketers that made us want this flawless tomato, and it's also the marketers that made us get to this point to where, and anybody, you go to Subway, and I don't want to bash on Subway because I like their sandwiches, but look at the middle of their tomato, and if it's like got a little whitish to it, that it was artificially ripened. They picked it green, put it in a container, shipped it wherever the heck. It didn't ripen on the vine, and so in Poland, most tomatoes still come attached to the vine. Like, they just rip the vine off, and you have like a 6-pack of tomatoes on a vine you put in your basket. It's a completely different paradigm here. Completely different in Europe in general. 8 months out of the year, by all of the Subway exits, at least in my neighborhood, there's like a little farmer's market stand that sets up every day with whatever fresh produce they have. And so it's just how it is, and I like it. I don't like living in the city, but I like that.
Small farms check a lot of boxes just because they tend to check those boxes. And I think that's an interesting thing, Michael, with you're talking about in Poland, is you kind of have this system that naturally developed in a way that it is the more sustainable like that. You don't have this desire for a national conglomeration of things because you have it local. And because it's local, you're tied to it, and you're more comfortable getting it local. You're more comfortable getting it dirty and those kind of things. You go pick up a potato from a farmer, you're not going to be as worried about if it's dirty. You go to Walmart, you get a potato that's dirty, it starts to raise a few questions. And I think it's interesting to try to like tease those out a little bit. Would you say there is a sense of like getting into the culture aspect, like almost like what kind of national pride do you think is tied to a farmer? Because we have this thing in America where we praise farmers for being the great thing, but we also don't want to talk with them. Like, we don't want to be around the farmer. We know they provide our livelihood. Is it a little bit more, you see the farmer in Poland, you give them a high five? Like what's that cultural difference like in that specific area?
Yeah, I think people are proud of their farmers around here. They tend to put up with them. There's no one honking horns behind tractors here. People wait patiently.
That's a good sign.
Yeah. That's an interesting data point. How many honks of a car behind a tractor to see whether or not there's a acceptance of the farm industry in your country or your neighborhood or your state. So count that one up, folks, and let us know. I'm curious where. So we've been diving into the organic more. I don't even know if we really dived into the organic, but just the natural growing of agriculture, right? How did that shift into a materials manufacturing and materials business? Because that's really where you're focused your effort now.
Yeah. Well, the answer for that is, so we'll go back to 2009 when I fall down the rabbit hole of sustainability, and I had decided, all right, I'm going to leave Ohio, and I'm going to go move to Southern California because things are more progressive there. People actually want organic food, and I wanted to go to San Luis Obispo there for their agriculture program because it was pretty well known for at least being semi-sustainable. And so that never happened. I never started over there. California didn't kind of work out the way I planned, and I had made an invention at the time for this thing called hemp wick, because a few months prior I was being all high and mighty towards my dad for me quitting cigarettes and him not quitting cigarettes. And so a friend of mine gave me a bunch of like organic tobacco and this thing called hemp wick to stop him from using his Zippo lighter and inhaling all those fumes. So I wanted my dad to be a healthier cigarette smoker. And so he thought that hemp wick was the dumbest idea. He's like, why would I use my Zippo to light this string just so that I have a safe flame for lighting my cigarette? This is dumb. So I invented a hemp wick dispenser, and fast forward to when I got accepted to a business school in Poland in 2012, moved over here, kind of I continued to work on the concept. Then the business partner and I split. He went off and did it his way, which was, I wanted it to be assembled by veterans, made in America, that kind of thing. He just wanted to do some cheap junk from China. We split off. And that's when I got launched into textiles. And so for me, I kind of became like a cannabis entrepreneur. But these days I don't call myself a cannabis entrepreneur. I'm a sustainability entrepreneur. Cannabis is one of the paints on the palette, right? Along with linen and nettle and a bunch of other of these bast fiber plants. So that's how that got started. It's been an adventure.
There's a lot of big problems in agriculture. There's a lot of problems when it comes to sustainability and textiles and those. How do you view that path forward to making an impact on those problems? Whether just through your business plan or if you want to take it bigger, I'm fine with that either. But just how do you see yourself making an impact on that change?
One of the things that there were a few things that really shocked me when I first started going into it. Thing number one is how many planets worth of resources we're presently using as humans, right? Like Americans are one version. Like Americans use like 6 planets. If everyone lived like Americans, we'd be using 6 planets worth of resources. And so for me, until we're at 0.999999 planets worth of resources used per year, it's unsustainable, because, I believe as human beings, we're creative, but we're also lazy. We need to use that creativity, like with aquaponics, to leverage nature to make it like we can work with nature to make things better. We can work with nature to make things more regenerative, to make things more natural. I don't think that organic food should be a luxury item. I tend to look at how we did things 300 years ago. I'm not saying that life was better 300 years ago. We all know that it wasn't. But if we look at some of the ways that we did stuff back then with the knowledge that we have today, I think we can make massive leaps forward. And so for me, my mission in life is basically sustainable cellulose. So this is cellulose, my paper is cellulose, hemp, linen, cotton. Cotton is pure cellulose. But the problem with cotton is it takes so many pesticides, herbicides, and a ton of water to grow. That's what makes linen better than cotton, but cotton or hemp is better than linen because it's more drought tolerant. So I don't know. There's so many different ways to attack this, but yeah, the hill I will die on is sustainable cellulose.
That makes me think, and I know we talked about this on the call you and I had a few weeks ago, but I brought up the idea of like the wizard versus the prophet. And I think that's a really interesting thing when you start getting into sustainability, because you're one of the people, and the smartest people I always talk with about these things see both of those paths. For the listeners, the concept there is basically the prophet is the person who goes and says, we need to go back 300 years, 1,000 years. That's when everything was perfect. That's when there wasn't pesticides. That's when there wasn't this. Everything was perfect back then. We have to go back. And the wizard is the futurist who just says, look, we'll invent our way out of anything. I can invent anything. We'll figure this problem out. It's not a problem at all. I think there's a really interesting thing because you get those two camps and there's interesting ideas in both camps. But what you're talking about there, Michael, is connecting the two. Going back and saying, look, this is how they did aquaponics in, Mexico City. I'm blanking on what Mexico City was before the Spaniards came. Sorry. But they were farming like crazy there in aquaponics. It's like, now we could take that with modern science and do so much more. What do you think is, in your opinion, what do you think is the barrier from connecting those two dots? Because you and I both intuitively connected those two as we found agriculture. Why do you think people don't?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I want to say that they believe the Hanging Towers of Babylon was aquaponics. They can't prove it, but that's what they think. I don't know. Are we all just not so disconnected from our food system? You know what I mean? Like, I think kids these days, and I feel old saying it, like the number one response of the career that they want to be is a YouTuber or influencer or whatever, And I mean, where I come from, people are proud to learn a trade, right? And I don't know if it's that way in New York City. I don't know if it's that way in LA. I don't know if it's that way in Miami or Seattle. I find that, people want to go to universities, spend a bunch of money to get some strange career and be kind of disconnect. Like, we're all now disconnected from nature, right? But there's also a complete backlash for it. Like, there's also the complete opposite happening. There are people going back to nature and trying to start little 1-acre market gardens and all this other stuff. And so there is, both sides of it. And, I hope one day that I start seeing aquaponic greenhouses on top of McDonald's roofs, stuff like that. That's what I want.
All the American-made stuff, because we're a consumer-driven people, we look at it and say, I can buy that ball cap for $25 that's made in Taiwan, or I can buy Dean's for $30. How patriotic am I going to be? And it's kind of the same thing when they talk about, a hemp shirt as opposed to whatever material this is. It's really soft, but I don't know what material it is, but I like it. So how do you shift people in that sense?
It's the same people who convince us that we need pretty tomatoes are the same people that need to convince us that the single credit card's worth of plastic we eat every month or so because of microplastics in our environment isn't worth it anymore. I don't know. There's got to be some turning around. I feel like it's a tough conversation, right? Because most of this climate change stuff and pollution stuff and whatever, it's all based on guilt, right? Like, people are trying to, like, no one changes because of guilt. No one changes because of finger pointing. You know what I mean? If anything, they just dig in their heels, right? So I've been thinking about it for a really long time. Like, so for example, like we've been working on a yoga mat prototype that's completely plant-based, and it slips on the floor, right? It doesn't grip the floor. It's natural. Whereas synthetic yoga mats, they grip the floor. They're made out of rubber. They're made out of crazy toxins. And so for me, and I don't really want to say this out loud, but it's kind of hypocritical, right? It's hypocritical that you got these yoga types who, like, fly over to India to become namaste and stuff, and all of their gear is plastic, right?
Yeah.
And so, but like, I'm not going to get any clients being like, "Ooh, you hypocrite, you better use my yoga mat. You better feel bad about your stuff and come buy mine." It doesn't work.
Could you talk a little bit about the sustainable difference of like using hemp instead of cotton or different things like that? Just to flip that, of if we took 1% of hemp and put it into all of these other textiles that don't use it, what kind of impact do you see?
So there's a bunch of different talking points, right? So from the paper point of view, if you look at over a 50-year period, there's a bunch of different arguments for and against it, right? So over a 50-year period in a forest, you'll get X tons of cellulose. But at the same time, the forestry people say, well, you're only interacting with that space once every 50 years. Whereas if you were to grow across 50 years hemp every year in the same place, then obviously you have sowing, harvesting, this, that, and the other thing, but you still get more cellulose. And that cellulose is recyclable up to 8 times, whereas tree cellulose is recyclable up to 3 times. Now, they say that hemp is also like 4 times more durable than cotton. Part of that is that the cotton fiber itself, like you get pilling with cotton, right? Because the fibers themselves are so short, and those little ends of the fibers starting to rub up against each other and making those little balls on your clothing. And like hemp doesn't do that. One thing that hemp does do is wrinkle, so like linen and hemp can get a little wrinkly, and that's okay. This was pressed until I put my leather jacket on and rode my motorcycle here. That's fine. But yeah, for me, and you're using less water, right? So the amount of water, I can't remember the number, but the amount of water to grow and process cotton is extraordinarily higher than with hemp and linen. And so yeah, for me, it's just interesting. And the last point about cotton versus hemp, when you're growing for textiles, you almost do not need any herbicides when it comes to hemp, because the seed rate per yard is so high and the plant is so aggressive that everything gets shaded out. Like nothing can survive under a canopy of 20-foot tall hemp, period. Whereas like if you look at all of the pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, etc., used for cotton, it's crazy.
I just want to say this. Here's a deeper philosophical point to this, folks, and that is, just because it's a big problem doesn't mean don't attack it. Because small movements, small things, changing small amounts, even if it's Ball Arena only sells soda and beer in aluminum cups now because aluminum is 98% recyclable or whatever that math is. But that's a change. That's a significant change from what it was 2 years ago with the paper wax cups that you just throw up and they just become trash. So these little small things make a difference to solve that problem.
Pick one piece of the problem and go solve it. To put it into a tribe and purpose spin, where your purpose is, where your skill set is, go solve that problem. That's how you make an actual difference.
Hey, Michael, this has been great, man. A long time coming. I'm glad we did this today, and truthfully, I'm feeling another one coming around in another 6 months or a year or so, because it's just so interesting to dive into all these bits and pieces about sustainability.
I'd be honored.